Some books arrive in your life like assignments, something you read because you're supposed to. Others arrive like conversations. They sit you down, look you in the eye, and ask questions you didn't expect. The Noli is one of those books. It's not just a novel, not just a relic of the past. It's an invitation to listen, to see, and to reflect on what it means to be part of a people and a story much larger than yourself. What makes it even more striking is how it bridges time. Written more than a century ago, it still feels alive, as if its words are reaching across generations to speak directly into the present. It doesn't matter whether you're encountering it in a classroom in Manila, revisiting it years later, or discovering it for the first time as a foreigner. The Noli meets you where you are, and once it does, it refuses to let you walk away unchanged. When I first opened the Noli, I expected history. I expected a window into the past, something Filipinos might read in school because it's part of the curriculum. But as I moved through its pages, I realized it's not just a book about the 1800s, it's a book about us, about people, about the ties that bind us together, and how fragile those ties can become when power, greed, or fear step in. Rizal didn't just write a novel, he gave his people a mirror. He showed them the injustices they lived through every day, the cruelty of authority, the arrogance of the privileged, the silent suffering of ordinary families. And what makes it timeless is that it wasn't told as abstract politics. It was told through human stories, through faces, through voices that his readers recognized as their neighbors, their friends, themselves. That's why the Noli was dangerous. It made people see not just the oppression they faced, but the humanity they shared. It reminded them that they were not isolated in their pain, that they belonged to each other. And once you realize that, once you feel that sense of shared struggle, you can't stay silent anymore. That is the seed of change. For me, coming from outside the Philippines, I was struck by how much of this still echoes today. We talk about Rizal like a hero from the past, but his insights live in the present. The faces may be different, the systems may have changed, but inequality, abuse of power, and corruption haven't disappeared. They've just taken new shapes, and the Noli is still whispering, "Look, don't turn away. Remember who you are to one another." That's where the idea of kapwa comes in. Kapwa is one of the most beautiful discoveries I've made in Filipino culture. It's not a word that translates easily because it's not just about community or empathy. It's about seeing yourself in the other. It's about saying, "Your struggle is my struggle, your dignity is my dignity." Rizal didn't use the word kapwa in the book, but he painted it on every page. When I read Rizal's novel, I hear kapwa in the silence of those who endured, in the anger of those who resisted, and in the courage of those who chose to stand up. And I think about today, in a world where life feels faster and more individualistic, where success is measured by what you alone can achieve, kapwa sometimes feels like it's slipping away. But books like the Noli bring it back into focus. They remind us that the health of a nation, the strength of a people, comes not from individual victories, but from collective dignity. And here is where I want to speak from the heart. Even as someone who was not born Filipino, I feel strangely close to this idea of kapwa. Maybe it's because of the friendships I've built, the stories I've heard, and the warmth I've experienced whenever I've connected with the Filipino community. At times, I already feel as if I'm part of it, like I've been welcomed into something bigger than myself, and it makes me want to live up to that, to not just admire kapwa from a distance, but to truly be part of it. What Rizal was doing was more than exposing injustice. He was weaving a fabric of identity. He was reminding Filipinos that they were not powerless subjects of an empire, but a people with a shared story, a shared soul. That sense of belonging, that spark of unity, was what gave courage to a generation to fight for independence. And here's what strikes me most. Every generation has to rediscover that for themselves. It's not enough that Rizal wrote the Noli 140 years ago. Each of us has to look into that mirror again to see how the same patterns of injustice repeat, how the same wounds remain, and how the same hope still burns. That's why this book is alive. It's not just history, it's not just literature, it's a reminder that Kapwa is still the answer, that the Philippines, with all its beauty, struggles, and resilience, is strongest when people remember they belong to one another. So for me, it's a conversation. It's me saying, here is a piece of your past that speaks directly to your present. Here is a story that challenges us not to forget who we are to each other. And maybe in listening again, in reflecting again, we keep Rizal's dream alive, a dream of a country where justice and dignity aren't privileges but rights, where Kapwa is not just a word but a lived reality. So let this not just be about reading chapters, let it be about carrying them forward, because every time we remember, every time we choose to see ourselves in the struggles of others, we are answering Rizal's call, and we are keeping alive the heartbeat of a nation that still believes in a future of fairness, compassion, and shared strength. In the end, the Noli isn't asking us to memorize dates or characters. It's asking us to recognize ourselves in its pages, to see both the flaws and the courage of humanity reflected back. If we carry that with us, then Rizal's voice is not just preserved, it's continued. And maybe that's the true legacy of this book, not the ink on paper, but the way it keeps teaching us to see, to remember, and to belong. Because every time we remember, every time we choose to see ourselves in the struggles of others, we are answering Rizal's call. And in doing so, we keep alive the heartbeat of a nation, not only in the Philippines, but wherever people fight for dignity, compassion, and shared strength. And maybe that's also why the Noli speaks so strongly to me as someone looking in from the outside. I may not share the same history, the same ancestry, or the same soil, but I recognize the emotions, the injustices, and the hope that live within its pages. The struggles Rizal described are deeply Filipino, but they are also deeply human. In that way, the book doesn't close its doors to foreigners. It invites us to listen, to learn, and to stand in solidarity. For me, reading the Noli as a foreigner feels like being welcomed into a conversation that is both intimate and universal. It reminds me that while I cannot claim the story as my own, I can honor it, carry its lessons, and let it shape the way I move in the world. And perhaps that is part of Kapwa too, not just within one nation, but across all of humanity. To see ourselves reflected in one another, to share dignity across borders, and to remember that belonging is not limited by language or birthplace.